maybe write down some of the stuff because you'll lose some of it by the end of the night. Maybe tomorrow it might dawn on you that, hey, that does make sense. And it's a ton of great information. And I'm sitting here taking some mental notes myself and just trying to get ready for the air quality part. But just for everybody listening, I do air quality and I have questions myself. So there's never a wrong question in this line of work.
Well, and I always try to keep in mind the fact that if I have a question, other people probably have that question too.
Absolutely,
So
absolutely.
If you're asking your question, you're actually benefiting everybody around. Be shy about that.
That can cut down on some of the anxiety that other people may have. Some people may not feel that they're skilled or knowledgeable enough to ask it correctly. And this is the right place.
That's a wonderful.
I'm gonna jump up or how are we gonna do this? I'm okay.
Laptop, this guy doesn't work here, so for that, we just bounce it back into it.
Okay. So for everybody in the room that didn't see me come in or just that's just now joining the room also, Caleb Minthorn, I'm the air quality technician for the tribe here. And some of you might know me, but for some of the guests, external, born and raised here, and air quality monitoring, and some outreach, and a little bit of budget work and some planning. And sometimes I get to cross paths with Colleen, and so this is where I get to do some climate work with her and DNR. So if you guys don't mind, I'll just talk a little bit about the photo here and why this photo here is important. This photo is it's at a prescribed burn event, and as you can see, the smoke itself is nicely just kind of rolling off to the left there. There's no big flames jumping off the hill there. This photo it shows how a proper prescribed burn should go, and there's a lot more to it, but just off the surface, that's why this photo is here. Because we're talking about the air quality, which you can see in this photo, there is some air quality impact. And you can also see that there may be some risk involved with those hillsides, behind there, looking pretty dry. And then what to know for decision making. And there is a lot that goes into decision making, air quality and risk. So we'll jump into that and try and keep this as I like to say, as organic as possible.
Just really quick, the talk is to give people a foundation of understanding for what they might need to know about making decisions when the air quality is.
All right, so this slide is one of the best examples that you can find on the internet. It's even EPA. This is how they explain stuff. And I'll jump into the visual here in a minute, but PM, particulate matter or particle matter, you'll hear it said in different ways. And PM10 is dust and PM 2.5 is smoke. And the difference is they're measured in microns. And you might not ever hear the word micron very much, but a micron is, as you see in the photo, it's the end of the length of your hair. That's considered a micron, or that piece of sand, that's a micron. And those red dots that you see in that little circle, those are 2.5 microns. They're much smaller than the blue ones. They're much smaller. And the reason we kind of decipher between the two is because the red particles, particulates, can actually pass through your blood barrier in your lungs and the blood-brain barrier on your right here. Once you breathe it in, it can just go straight kind of into your brain, depending on the density of the smoke and kind of how you're feeling. And it says it right there in the bottom. We don't ever really notice it. What we might notice first is a headache or just some sore throat. We'll get into that. We'll get into that as the presentation kind of moves along here. And if I'm going a little too quick, feel free to raise your hand, anyone. Maybe I can back up. Okay, good, good. It's been a while since I've kind of jumped back into the presentation mode. We'll move along here. Intro to atmospheric science. It's atmospheric science. It plays a major part in air quality, and we don't talk enough about the importance of the atmospheric science. Without being able to explain what's happening, it would be even harder to explain why the air quality is deteriorating or improving to the point that we feel better and we can go outside. And so the visual here just kind of shows how the air we breathe sits in layers like pancakes on top of each other, and they can also kind of they can definitely condense into much tighter columns, like at the mixed layer at the right here. When the air forms those columns, it sucks moisture up into the air, and if there's enough energy, that moisture can it can hit the dew point and maybe drop rain, or it can just hang up into the higher elevations until it hits a pressure zone, and we're backed up against the Blue Mountains. So this visual right here could be a nice little comparison. Because we're against the Blue Mountains. Sometimes we get rain, sometimes we don't. And there's reasons why. And these different cloud layers and mixed layers and surface layers, they play into that. And I don't want to get too much into it. That would just take up too much time. But the mixed depth over in the right, that's super important because you need your air to rise and mix at a nice level. If it's mixing at ground level, we're likely going to be impacted by it if there's a fire. And as you can see, the pollution coming out of those stacks, they're starting to hit the ground level as they move farther away from that factory. And that's very important because of this presentation. Climate adaptation, it isn't just happening naturally. It's happening because of man-made events, business that helps the world go around. So that's one part of my job is just making sure that we breathe good air and businesses are providing good air, to some extent.
You make the decision on the res, whether it's a burn day or a not burn day. So people can do their field burning or their barrel burning. That is dependent on these conditions, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. Without having the, I wouldn't say perfect conditions, but we have a fairly wide open window for burn, for yes or no burn conditions. And our office, we determine that based off of several criteria. And I don't have enough time to list all of them because there's quite a few. But when it comes down to it, common sense says that if it's too windy and if it's too dry out and too hot, it's probably not a good idea to be lighting off something larger than, let's say, a barbecue pit. That's kind of where we would say, no, your guys it's a no burn day.
What you do affects other people. Air is really, really good at demonstrating that. And then I just really wanted to quickly touch on the fact that indoor ventilation is not all the same. Like we talked about it a little bit earlier, the ventilation is usually a last thought in people who are putting together buildings. And so we see two examples of different kinds of ventilation. On the right is that mixing ventilation where you have that one entry point for the air and then just one small exit kind of very close to the entry point. And so the air is kind of mixing together. And that was something that was a really big effect of the pandemic, was that the mixing ventilation, it kind of brought the virus around rather than kind of shunting it out. On the left, the displacement ventilation is an ideal condition that we would like to see, where you're having ventilation come from the top and being kind of sucked up or ventilation come from the bottom and being kind of sucked up the top. So you're actually having, you're moving contaminants from the air up to where it's going to be taken out. So indoor ventilation, not all sizes are the same. And I just wanted to highlight that.
Absolutely not. No, that's a whole presentation. So, want to kick off the round or? Okay.
So in kind of an attempt to get a handle on exposure that people are having for air quality, we visualized this really draft seasonal round of air quality hazards. And so the blue is kind of that like winter to early spring condition where we're having more of those indoor air quality issues. So we're having wood smoke being a problem. We're having kind of the indoor mold. People are being in their houses a lot longer. But then as we move into the spring, we're seeing more of those allergens and dust being picked up, moving into the yellow part where it really is those agricultural activities. And so it's those pesticides drifting, it's the dust from the tillage activities, it's that heat and that ozone. And then into the red is our fire season, where really that smoke is going to be the primary contributor to particulate. And so I pulled those two photos out here because those are the ones that we do. The spring, the dust from the farming activities, and then in the late summer into the fall, the wildfire smoke.
Yeah. These two pictures, I just want to touch on why they're crucial and they apply to what we're talking about right now. That harvester in the top right, as you can see, it's kicking off dust just from, kind of kicking the wheat into the collector there. But more importantly, on the horizon of the photo, there's a haze above the mountains there that most people don't typically see. I can see it just in this photo because it's late August. There should be a haze, and it's important to pay attention if you see that haze. Let's say in the springtime. Sometimes we get days where it is pretty hazy out, even though there's no fires and there's no agricultural activities going on. So that's just something that it's good to pay attention to because you never know when you might have a headache. So it's something that helps explain why things happen to our bodies. I'm not a doctor or anything, but this is just all these things correlate. And the picture of the fire below, that fire doesn't look like it's too under control to me. So that I would consider that it looks like a wildfire to me. And both of those things are contributing to particulate and ozone. And right now we're in the heart of ozone season, especially in the Columbia Basin where it gets super hot, where you get a lot of blue skies and low wind events. That's when the ozone tends to kick up. And it's not just a natural event. It does coincide with man-made activities. So with us being in the Columbia Basin, we have a lot of sunlight, so that does contribute to some ozone production. It's not terrible here. We're in a pretty good spot, but
we talked about it kind of in the earlier presentation that zone 6 along the coast.
Yep, the gorge, that's kind of our corridor that delivers it to us. And how do we monitor air quality? That's where I would come in here and kind of step in and maybe bring in one of these monitors. There's different applications. The top right one is a purple air monitor, and it's just Colleen. It's just, as you can see, it's in her hand. It's very small, no bigger than, let's say, a cup of coffee. And there's two small sensors in there and a fan. These two fans, if you can see that, it just kind of pulls air in here, and there's some laser beams that kind of bounce around, and they calculate the loss of the particulates through the laser, and that's just called light scattering, beta attenuation light scattering. And the other monitor in the top right, that's the IAQ visual. It's slightly different from the purple air. It has a LCD on it. Some of you guys that work in the building may have seen one around, and it pulls in PM 2.5 just like the purple air here. And it also pulls from local air networks to be able to see if they compare with that. So that's what the IAQ visual does. And then the purple air map here to the right, that's where that shows all across the purple air network, which is worldwide. It's worldwide now. Almost every country has a purple air in it. And we placed a purple air all across the ceded territory. Each one of these stars has a purple air monitor at it. And we intend on placing more just to be able to support the first foods mission. And Colleen was talking about where to go get huckleberries or where to go get roots. And sometimes it may be smoky out, and these monitors, they may show different colors, and you'll generally want to go where it's green. You can even go where it's yellow and still be okay. But on the map here, I wouldn't go anywhere where it's dark maroon or even orange or dark red. So that's what this map is good for.
Well, and part of our conversation about introducing those atmospheric conditions is to get at the point that sometimes the smoke is local, but regional. Like sometimes the smoke is coming from the guy down the street, but sometimes it's coming from Canada and Montana. And so it might be really hard to get away from those kind of things. So it was important to note that the local conditions might be impacted by global things that are happening as well. If it's local, you can get away from it by going to a different place. If it's a more regional thing, it's going to be harder to get away.
And odd enough, the fire a few days ago, we didn't get a hit on any of our monitors. It was, yeah, none of them picked up on it. Probably because it was focusing the smoke more north, which was good, but bad for the people of Walla Walla and Athena. But that's why we're doing this presentation, just to kind of show that the smoke, it doesn't really, it's not picky, it's not choosy. It's going to go where the atmospheric conditions, kind of force or dictate it to. And then there's more communication channels that the tribe and ourselves, DNR, Air Quality, and Colleen's program are trying to get out to the public, and there's different methods. Our office, we came up with this nice little, just short one-page, we just call it an update or a newsletter. And, we just take some news and a little bit of weather and a little bit of the monitoring information that we get from Purple Air. So that box in the upper right, those are actual real-time, well, not real-time, but those are pulled from real monitors. And then the smoke image that's pulled off of the National Weather Service. They have different forecast models, and you can if you know what you're doing, you can kind of manipulate those models to get different smoke visuals like this. And this one is showing the smoke coming kind of through the area, but not really. It's not really that bad, but you can still see smoke on that satellite image.
May of this year, so unhealthy in May is not a great time.
It's not. And the smoke is coming earlier this year, even though it's not very hot. So we got a little lucky so far. But it's hard to predict what's coming down the road.
Well, there's been a lot of work into figuring out how to communicate error to folks. Like a lot of work in previous decades has gone into water quality. We know what poor water quality looks like. It's murky, it's stagnant, it's got algae in it. But it can be harder to see what poor air quality looks like until it's like you can see the air. By the time that you get there, you've already passed several points of unhealthiness. And so really these colors have been an attempt to communicate risk of air quality, even though you can't see what the risk is.
And that's where the color scheme comes in. The folks, the fine folks with the United States EPA, they came up with this color scheme, and green is good, yellow is moderate, orange unhealthy for sensitive groups, and that area can kind of get a little tricky because it depends on what is unhealthy and how sensitive you are, and then unhealthy, very unhealthy, and hazardous. Those there's really no way of saying it's worse than that. So that's why those colors are so dark.
Well, and even those might even be lacking for the era that we're going into, because this one stops at 500, but in Mission a couple of years ago, we experienced 800 parts per million, and it was 1,000 parts per million in some people's houses too. So like, how do you even measure that? That's not even on the scale.
And 500 was just a number that, it's just a number that they figured. It's all we can really monitor so far, even though the monitors we have can blow past 500. I can't find anything else on why it wouldn't go beyond that. And by the time it gets to hazardous, we'll be working with the public. We'll be trying to let the public know there's mitigation practices you can start looking into right now. So that's kind of our job also.
To talk about a few of those. But this is important to note because this impacts treaty rights and our ability to go out and be with the land. Because if the air is unhealthy, or if it's unhealthy for sensitive groups, and you have a auntie or a cutla who has respiratory issues and she wants to go out huckleberry picking, it would be very hard to say no because the air quality is bad, you know? And so this really is a barrier to access for first foods that we're experiencing. This is an intangible barrier that people can be risking their health to go out and keep that promise to the first foods. And so this is part of what we're trying to do today is provide strategies and skills for folks who are going to keep being out of the land, keeping that promise to keep yourselves as safe and healthy as possible.
And then once again, here's the map, and all the way down at the bottom, that's clear to the right. We don't own all of those, but for the most part, everything in the Pendleton area is made mostly ours. Joseph, Wallowa, we're trying to get one in Lostine. We have one in Pilot Rock, Athena. We even have one in Dayton, Washington, because that's where our castnet site is. And the EPA, they were gracious enough to let us put a purple air on the castnet site. And so that's why we have one up there, because that's land that we own now as a tribe, and trying to restore that property and make it useful for people to harvest and to be able to go hunting and fishing safely. You know, today, you know, today the air quality was great.
He's great today. Go outside, breathe some air.
And just a little more on one of those communication channels. If you guys haven't heard of the Camp Crier app, it's available through Cayuse Native Solutions on the App Store. And you just go to the App Store and you just type in Camp Crier app. And it's just like downloading any app. You might need to enter an email or some information. But there's the app will allow you to get updates on smoke awareness. We did a small project with Cayuse Native Solutions to be able to connect the network, the Purple Air network, to the Camp Crier app. So now they're integrated in a way that if the air quality gets bad enough, the Camp Crier app will let you guys know.
And we really push the Camp Crier app for all kinds of climate adaptations, because as we've learned from social media sites like Facebook and Instagram, it's really important to be able to talk to each other and communicate in that way. But all of those sites are owned by people who are trying to make money off of the things that we share. And so this is really a place where we can have that kind of connection that social media sites bring for us, but without that data harvesting component too. And so again, we're here to talk about why is air quality important for you, for your family. And we had mentioned that that orange color in the air quality colors is unhealthy for sensitive groups. What is a sensitive group? There are ones that we traditionally think of. So elders are going to be more sensitive because of the strain on their body over the years. Children because of their hyperactivity and because of their development. Pregnant women because they are, keeping a life not only their own but also their child's. People with respiratory illness obviously are going to be experiencing issues when we talk about air pollution. And then cardiovascular patients, for the same reasons that we talked about the smoke earlier and the heat earlier, is that if your heart is not as strong and healthy as it could be, anything that makes it work harder is going to have a negative impact on it. And I would actually add diabetes patients, because diabetes, anything again that's going to make your body work harder, such as smoke, is going to have a negative impact on those conditions. And so these are the people that we generally think of as being sensitive. And I also wanted to note that acute versus chronic exposure. So acute is if you're walking into a campfire. Basically, if you're like standing right next to the campfire and it's like blowing into your face. That's really acute. It's a short-term, really high intensity exposure. A chronic exposure can also be really dangerous, because if you're being exposed over longer periods of time to smoke pollution, you are going to be experiencing those effects over that period of time. So it would be like the equivalent of looking into a campfire, but over 10 years. It's going to have kind of that same outcome. And so there are seasonal indoor and outdoor sources. We touched a little bit on that earlier. So like wood stoves here in our area are a really big cause of indoor air pollution. That inversion that we get sometimes in the wintertime can trap those smudge pots, air and all the wood smoke. And then the dust, again, it's not just the smoke that we have to worry about. Want to add anything?
During the first few waves of COVID, the smoke concerned me just because of what the news was reporting, people with respiratory issues. And we're still probably several years out from actually finding out if that's true or not. Any good study does take quite a few years, and by my count, it seems like COVID is still kind of active. So that's just that was one very problematic area for a lot of people on a lot of different reservations, Indian reservations, not just here. So this isn't just here for Umatilla. This is for all natives, all Indians across Indian country can definitely suffer from these. But that was just one.
Yeah, and new locations too. So again, we kind of touched on this earlier, but like the East Coast that doesn't traditionally have smoke, like we here in the Western states have a certain level of smoke because fire is part of our ecosystem. But it's not really part of theirs on the East Coast. And so now they're being slammed with that fire, the smoke coming out of Canada. And so they're scrambling to figure out what we already know. And so it's not just these places that have traditionally had smoke. It's going to be all these new places. And so this is part of a climate change talk, right? So obviously climate change is going to have an impact on air quality. And we went through that really in detail in our earlier talk. And so I'm not going to focus on it too much. But we do see the incidences of catastrophic wildfire really increase. That map down there on the right shows the 600 to 700% burn increase really in our area. And on the left, that's a fire from last year or the year before or something that closed the highway. It closed I-84 for many hours because there was a fire burning right up next to the highway. And that smoke is not only a respiratory issue, but it's also a safety issue too. If you're driving on that highway and that smoke is present, the potential to run into other cars is a lot higher. Kind of like the fog in the wintertime, but in the summertime. And so we see the potential for the heat and the smoke and the drought and the dust to all really come together in one really awful air quality thing. So again, being prepared for this, we're not trying to scare you. We're just trying to get you prepared for something that is almost an eventuality at this point. And one thing that we're also trying to do is build smoke preparedness for because we know that intentional burns reduce the risk of this. But the problem with intentional burns is it puts smoke into the air during times of the year where there isn't a lot of smoke from catastrophic sources. So we could come through our summer of terrible smoke, and then we come into our fall season. October is a great time to do prescribed burn on the land, but there can be resistance to prescribed burn because people are tired of the smoke. And so if you go to a landowner and you say, we want to do some burning to prevent wildfire on your property, you say, no, I can't, I'm tired of the smoke. That is a barrier we are seeing to implementing some of this prescribed burn. Our area is really, really primed for prescribed burn, and really it would be a great benefit to our area. And it also has less smoke emissions from intentional burns. So down there on the left is a figure from our sovereignty section that we're going to talk about next month. And so we can see that the green dots are prescribed fire, smoke from prescribed fire. The blue is from resource objective wildfire. And that just means it's a fire that kind of got away, but that it's not threatening anything. So they're going to let it burn. That's resource objective. And then the red is suppression. So that's where people are trying to put out the fire actively, where we have firefighters. So we can see from this graph that the red fires, the suppression fires, are actually the ones that generate more smoke than the prescribed fire or those resource objective fires. And so really getting ahead of the wildfire risk by putting fire back onto the land in a good way actually reduces, in the long run, our smoke exposure. But because people might be tired of it over a season, we might not be able to implement that in the way that we want, unless people are prepared for it. So, the crux of how do we protect ourselves? We have 3 different kind of categories. So at home, on the go, and then at work. And so at home is the one that gets focused on a lot. When we hear shelter in place orders, so when people say, go inside, the smoke is too much. Again, really depends on the building that you're in and having knowledge of how porous that building is. You can also have an air quality monitor to know your conditions. Like I said, I have one in my home and it was really, really eye-opening. When I would have thought that I was safe, I was still in hazardous air quality, even though I was running filters as much as I could. And so I know that now. I know that my house is really porous, that maybe staying inside there isn't always the best condition. Weatherizing your home against particulate matter. Weatherization is really great for energy efficiency. It's also really good for keeping what is outside inside. The problem then too is that what is inside is not getting out either. So if you have mold issues, weatherization could actually cause problems. But for keeping smoke out, making sure that your house is sealed against the outside air is really helpful. Modifying indoor activities. So we hear when smoke is really bad, maybe don't vacuum. That kicks the dust up into your air. Maybe don't cook on the range because the burning actually adds to the air quality issues inside of your house. That's how I think some people got 1,000 parts per million when we had 800 outside. Maybe there were indoor activities that were happening that contributed to poor air quality or then being localized in the house like that. And so anything that's going to reduce the dust or any kind of burning, like maybe don't make popcorn in the microwave. It does call for a little bit of like policing of yourself, which sucks. But if you can preserve your indoor air quality, it's really important. And then the last thing is that supplemental filtration. So that is our pre-made filters. So this is one that I utilize. And so this is one about 100 something bucks at Weimar. But then there's also do-it-yourself versions that work pretty good, you know, and so we've got kind of an example of one of those. So a box fan, if you put the filters kind of on either side, this is going to work. There, it's fine. I would caution against the slapping it right up against the thing. I've seen people do that. It works. It's a fire hazard. I would give that fan some breathing room, like the triangle that I've got up there. So that's just 2 filters taped together with just a piece of cardboard taped on top. And it forms that triangle so that you're not having that filter right up against the fan as an as a fire hazard. And then I have my handy dandy 800s to keep me safe on the go. And then cars have filters in them. And so if you're actually out and you're really worried about your air quality, if you just sit in your car and run that air fan on recirculate within your car, that actually reduces a lot of that pollution. And so being in your car, making sure that your filter is replaced is a really great way. Making sure that you're safe out on the go. And I know the masks are annoying you guys, but we're gonna have to start wearing them outside too. So I'm just trying to normalize it right now at this point.
I like the box fan filter, and I would really encourage everybody to give it a shot if you haven't done one last summer or the summer before. It just adds a little bit of peace of mind to you yourself and to your family. Because after about 2 or 3 months, you know, when you pull that filter off, you'll know why we're encouraging this. Yeah. They get pretty dirty. And all you gotta do is imagine that's the inside of your lungs or the brain, you know, inside your brain. And that's pretty nasty, Yeah.
Lennox, I know that you're on the line. And so you had shared with me that the filter that you had at your house had quite a bit of gunk on it. And so that's all stuff that you're preventing going into your lungs. And so it really does help.
And these are awesome. I have one myself, not this specific one, but these are incredible. If you don't like the paper masks, if you want to do stuff outside, protect yourself. That's all we can really say. In the age of climate adaptation, you know, we must adapt as well.
Well, and it's not just for like smoking things too. So if you work with hay or plant matter, that can get really up in your lungs as well. And so if you're sifting through a compost pile, if it's really dry, you might actually consider some sort of ventilation protection, because I actually knew somebody who had bacterial infection in their lungs from their compost pile. It cleared up okay, but he still was in the hospital for a minute. So
Wow.
it's a thing.
Does that protect you from pollen?
Yes, yes.
Absolutely.
So it would reduce allergies. Nice.
And that's a good question from DRC. Nothing's ever absolutely 100% perfect. These are just mitigation practices. And all we're trying to do is offer some solutions to an ever-changing problem. But we're doing our best to try and stay ahead of it. That's all we can do. And our people from a long time ago, they were no different. They did their best to stay ahead of disasters. They may not have called it climate adaptation, but they knew what it was. And they stayed ahead of it to the best of their ability.
That gets us to our last kind of category of how to protect yourself at work. If you're a field staff person, maybe look at the air quality predicted for the day. They get pretty good at the predictions, like at least day of. And so know what the air quality risk is at the location you're going to. And maybe be aware of some of those symptoms of PM sickness. And so Caleb, you had kind of started talking about those. So you want to share a little bit of what those symptoms are?
Yeah, the telltale sign for myself is you can usually catch it right here in the upper olfactory. As it kind of gets close to your brain, there's a sensation. You might want to call it an odor or a smell, but it's to me it's a wiggling sensation. And shortly after 2-3 hours, I might have a headache and or worse. May feel sick to the stomach, but that's just me. Everybody is completely different. I'm not diabetic, but there's diabetes in my family. So that's something I try and keep ever thoughtful, because for all I know, this is pushing me closer towards diabetes, but that's all I can do is try and take care of myself. That's what Colleen said earlier when I walked in. It's on us to take care of ourselves and heed these warnings. Listen to the local health authorities when they a certain message. It's probably wise to listen and take in other social media messages too. The Oregon Health Authority, they deliver a lot of good messages. It's because we're on the tribe doesn't mean that we can't listen to other folks that are trying to do the same work that myself and Colleen.
And speaking of the social media, the Camp Crier app. So we had talked earlier about those thresholds that set. So they're right there. So on the Camp Crier app, it has that trigger of 150 to 200 parts per million air quality. It sends out this warning that says limit 4 hours in the field unless staff decide to wear a respirator. And then above 200, it recommends administrative leave for staff in the field. To set those thresholds. And then I just wanted to share a little bit about our Preparing for Fire project, which is a few years old now at this point, but we were able to, through the grace of Meyer Memorial Trust, be able to purchase air quality respirators, filters, and then do some outreach for the community around. So we actually have extra filters for those. And so we actually don't know who these went out to because they were distributed through Yellow Hawk to priority patients. But I've heard through the grapevine a little bit of some of them might have gotten to. And so we have 2 extra filters for you each. They're a little bit spendy, so we wanted to make sure that we were buying them or providing them for folks. So if you have one of those Allen machines, let us know. We'll get some filters to you. You don't have to buy those yourself. And then just kind of an update that we had mentioned earlier, Yellow Hawk Tribal Health Center actually just hired someone through Oregon Health Authority funding to do disaster preparedness and for health related issues. And so Keela Solomon was brought on here recently and has been working on the air quality issues specifically. And through legislative funding, there was a bill that was passed last year. But actually, I think they talked to us about our project when crafting that bill. It actually makes me very proud that we helped make this bill happen that does provide air quality filters for folks. So I think they have 65 air filters and then roughly the same number of air conditioners. And so they're going to be working through Yellow Hawk's distribution and priorities list to get those out to people who are the highest. And so we are making changes, you guys. It is happening. We are getting things out to folks. Yeah, please.
Has she made contact with you, Becca?
Yes.
And you guys are contacting with our emergency preparedness people?
We're working on it. Who's the emergency preparedness people?
Inside and,
Oh, yeah. We like to work a little bit more closely with them. I know that I have looked through the emergency operations plan, but unfortunately. I'm more worried about the representative.
because I'm pushing it too, because I'm uniquely have I have a vasculitis now that, it affected my lungs and it permanently affected my lungs, but these things are occurring, so I'm always worried about that. As we're getting prepared to enter fire season, which we already saw, and I thank you, Caleb, for always making sure that, I knew about purple air, trying to keep Dawn informed. When you see that smoky sky, you look at the purple air right here and you'll know just kind of what it is right here.
Good. I think that was all that we had. We had contact information and then resources that we wanted to direct people to. And then again, on the bottom, Sheila Solomon is new.
It's the purple air map.
Go to it.
We need another one inside.
Yeah, it's a real live, real-time network. And you can click on individual sensors and they'll pull up a suite of options that these things monitor.
Do you have to be registered to those sensors?
No, it's all public. It's all public.
Kind of voluntary.
Cool.
See, like you can see where we're at right now.
Okay. Oh, cool.
So ours is really good, but if you went down smaller, you might see some smoky areas where you see where the change in color goes.
In the Midwest, it's really orange because of the Canadian fires.
And then what is the
Purple right there?
What is that purple? What is
It's like a gas compressor. That's why it's so high. It's just near a farm out in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
So you see those, that should alert you. Those colors will alert you. Right now, we're green.
What is it measuring?
Smoke, it's smoke.
Okay.
We call smoke PM 2.5.
Okay.
It's just the scientific jargon for it because of how small it is. The end of our hair is 10 microns, PM 2.5. It's you can't even see it. Like we can see the end of our hair, but you can't see a PM 2.5 particle. So that's why it enters into your blood very easily.
Mine might be 20 mics. Where's there?
So, does it analyze dust?
Actually, they do.
Yeah.
That's called PM 10. We
Okay.
just consider PM 10 dust.
They kind of get lumped together.
Okay.
Old school science used to just consider it one thing. Now it's more broken down because of the impacts it has on sensitive people and or different I would just say it different racial groups, different parts of the country. Yeah, it affects everybody in every different way possible.
Well, and dust, you can breathe it in. It can be an irritant to your lungs. It's not going to pass. Whereas
Smoke is so.
Unless there's microcilium on the dust, right?
the spore
Well, but Franklin County. Yeah, well, I don't know why it's not.
And that itself, the valley fever, we're in a desert environment. Valley fever comes from a desert environment.
We've already had incidents. There were 3 counties in Washington in 2010. Soil and we have it.
And 10 years ago, the weather, we were kind of going through these little mini patterns, these 10-year mini patterns where it gets wet, it gets cold, snowy, then we'll get a couple of dry years. It gets wet, cold, snowy. So we're starting to come back on it again. And it's an El Nino season officially.
And it really is kicked off by wet periods with intense heat all of a sudden. We get that. Like we have that cold spell with the rain and then it would just be, that was what happened in May. Those are perfect conditions. It's scary. But there are things we can do, so.
Who knows what's going on around here? I'm just kidding.
That's what we had for you guys today. Was there anything else that you want to talk about? We are 3 minutes out to the end of our day.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here.
I gotta come back in and get to the end of this, but I am totally into it, so. Yeah, got my support.
It should get worse. There it
Look
is.
at it, yeah.
If in Canada, it's worse. It's at the darkest purple part.
It's not very many.
It's worldwide too. This is a worldwide.
Oh, are all the dots the purple regulators?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So the green ones are the healthy ones.
Yeah.
Yeah, the green is
Cool.
Some are indoors, so it's kind of misconceiving. Some are indoors, so it should be green. You want it to be green if it's indoors, if you're living there.
So these, do they measure precipitation?
Not, these ones don't. We measure precipitation up in, Dayton, the air quality office. We do have a precipitation collector. It's a different setup. But these just do PM 2.5 and the air gets sucked up like this. But it does temperature, so we can tell how hot it is just by clicking on this little guy over here. If I can get there.
Sometimes they're paired with atmospheric weather stations.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so.
For farmers and stuff.
Yeah, exactly. That's part of our program. They're not exactly the same. but a lot
Yeah, they're
of them-
different.
This will show us how hot it is where it's hot. Down in Texas, I heard it's 113.
Yeah.
So they're adding more. They're adding more to these. That's the cool thing about them. These are just kind of prototype versions. They're getting much more precise.
Mold, do those ones detect mold?
No, not necessarily, but I wouldn't rule out that they wouldn't be trying to work on one. Mold is a very tricky pollutant. Well, it's not really a pollutant, it's because it's natural. It's a really tricky thing to go after because it can be in the air one moment and gone.
On the next.
But the person could still be sick. That's why I meant it's tricky.
Visually.
So can you get another purple one, air one into the, the lobby or whatever?
Yeah, where are rotunda windows?
We got more. It's that time. It was that time of the year.
Because I want to point it out to Don and that one will be right in the lobby and then you have the one that's outside. That way he can like start looking at it. Cause I go, Don, when I'm coming in, you can see smoke. And so he starts like checking to see how he indicates contact with you or the emergency preparedness or even our outdoor workers, not knowing that.
So that's why I kind of like these, is because if you connect it to a Wi-Fi, this isn't connected to a Wi-Fi right now, but if it was connected, you could actually find the closest outdoor station. So you could be taking your sample in here and then reading from the outside. And so you can see how immediately in real time, how your air quality indoors is changing in relationship to outside.
Outside, how neat.
Yeah, so that's why I really.
Those are awesome. They really are.
I'll let Don know.
It's cheap and effective. That's the whole point. We don't want to, sell the family farm trying to get something that isn't going to tell us what we want.
They make the invisible. We are over time. And so I think that if we don't have anything else, we're going to call this a success and thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yay.
No, that's first.
I was gelling on.
So I was sitting in my
Doing
meeting.
good, but I watched
Janetta goes, hey, have you seen this?
This is
From 5 to 6. Teach them conservation, which we should be very concerned.
Mr. Sharon.
Having a meeting about regenerative ag on the CTUIR island. So I'm like,
Right, well, I think I'm gonna.
Janetta asked me if I was gonna
Thank you so much for
go,
coming. This
board
was
of trustees,
really
or not.
fun.
Because they should be including us because,
So much, and have a great day.
The ad writing.
yeah. See, I don't really know how many